do that for the rest of your life, to make art that freaks you out and totally be vulnerable and totally surrender and expose yourself and be pretty sure that the thing you're making is too risky and crazy to work. That's like a really wild way to live a life. But I also don't know how to make good art any other way.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the About Story podcast. Kit is on my show. Welcome, Kit. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my joy. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a minute. So we
figured it out. 6 years.
6 years.
Six or maybe 7.
Yeah.
But maybe 6.
Yes. But yeah, we worked together on the Amazon show, Zelda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were early days of Amazon. Amazon is way before Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
We were a tiny but mighty show.
Yes, it was really cool. And so let's kind of like talk a little bit about how you got that project. That was kind of one of your first big TV shows that you worked on, right?
It was the first show I was staffed on as a TV writer. Yeah. I mean, do you want me to like give you like the
sure.
quick version of how I became a writer?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like what got you interested in writing in the first place.
Yeah. And I can go quickly from being like a lonely child to like staffing on that show. I won't take up too much time.
I like to hear the story, the journey. The journey is important.
Yeah, I'll do a quick version of the journey. Is I was one of those kids that wasn't good at anything. Like I wasn't athletic. I wasn't that good at school. I wasn't an artist. I wasn't a singer or a dancer. And I would look at these kids that were great at things and be so intensely envious, and more to the point, just like not understand. Like I didn't know what it was like to be like fantastic at something. I knew what it was like to love things. I loved reading books and I loved going to the movies and I loved watching TV, but I didn't know how to externalize any of that. And then I just got really lucky. My sophomore year of high school, my theater teacher started a playwriting class, it was 5th period every day. You'd like go to the library. By the end of the year, you used to write a play. It was kind of a glorified independent study, but I just like fell in love. I've fallen in love a couple times in my life. Once with my husband, once with my son, and once with writing. So I just, the summer after that class, my dad would go to these Planned Parenthood book sales, and one of these sales, he got me like all these, they used to make these best American play volumes, would be like the best American plays of 1973, or the best American plays of like 1935. And I just read them, and I wrote play after play. I went to UCLA for undergrad and grad school back to back.
What was that like in UCLA?
UCLA was hard. It kicked my butt. It was I was like this high school player. It's like almost like, I don't know if you've seen Royal Tenenbaums, but kind of like a Gwyneth Paltrow, like a Margot Tenenbaum. And I felt like I was almost pretty good at something, and then I got thrown in with a bunch of kids that were at the top of their game as actors, directors, and I was scrambling and flailing, but like still really like I would, even though I felt like the least talented person there, I was still like putting on plays and like rehearsing under stairwells and like putting on plays in multi-purpose rooms and like just like writing UCLA and asking for grants I had no business asking for. Like I look back at myself from now almost 20 years ago, and I'm like, you were so dumb, but you were so scrappy, and I'm so proud of you. Like if I was my own kid, I'm really proud of you for just like, I think in my 20s, I was like, I was so dumb at that age. Now I look back in my 30s, I'm like, no, you were, you tried things, you threw things against the wall and saw what stuck.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight is 20/20. I feel like oftentimes you just got to go for it. And I feel like that separates a lot of people. Is there's people that don't go for it, and there's other people that are just like, whatever, I'm just going to go for it. It's
courage, it's stupidity, and I'm really grateful I had both for like a time in my youth. And I mean, I think we're kind of barreling into my 20s, which was just like being scrappy and just like we were talking earlier before we started shooting about freelancing. I tutored, I worked for these women's websites, like writing about like, I don't know, like mascara for your eyebrows and like what Justin Bieber's hair was doing that day. Like just like whoever would hire me to like do a thing, I would do it. I think I was teaching, as tutoring too, I was teaching a little bit. I was substitute teaching. Like I had like, I don't know, like I had like 10, 12 like W-2s, W-4s a year, and which was crazy, but I was doing it. And then I finally, leading up to the Amazon show, I was working finally full-time at one of these women's websites, and I was quote unquote an online journalist. I was writing professionally. I was I had health insurance, but the writing wasn't substantive. Again, it was about celebrities and makeup. And even when it was about social issues, it was kind of in attacking it in a surface way. And I felt empty inside. So I was just writing pilots on weekends and just going out on meetings and interviews and just trying. And with Amazon, I got really lucky. It was sort of, and I think this happens a lot with TV staffing, it's a confluence of things, right? So I'd gone out on several interviews for Amazon shows, so I think they liked my work over there, and they knew me at that point, and they just wanted me to keep coming back in. I think there's like the acting equivalent of when a casting director likes you and they don't have a part for you yet, but they just keep bringing you back in. So they kept bringing me back in, and I met Donna and Nicole, both our former bosses, always friends, right? And also friends of this, and former guests of this.
Yeah, they
too.
Were on the show. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is like where you hyperlink,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Like Donna and Nicole.
Yeah. No, they're fantastic. I really love them.
They're the best show moms anyone could ever ask for. So they called me in for this. They had read my script, which was, the show, Z, the beginning of everything, was about Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald. It was in, the roaring 20s, and it was, my pilot, my sample they read was modern day, and in a lot of ways on a surface level had nothing to do with the show, but it was also about, Zelda is a young woman who is courageous and stupid, just like me, just like the heroine of the pilot that I wrote. And I think they saw, even though it wasn't a period piece, and even though in like surface ways it didn't speak to the show, I think in like deep thematic and soul ways it spoke to the show. So they had me in, and it was talking about confluence of events. It was when I was in college, I just loved Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald. I would read their love letters. I had parts of their love letters memorized. I was just so I just became obsessed with these two people and their relationship. And I read everything I could about them. I wrote a not great screenplay about them. Like I really just went all in on this relationship. And so it was like a decade later, it was almost like taking a test for a thing I had studied for obsessively 10 years prior. And so it wasn't just any staffing meeting or any job interview. I was able to talk about the thoughts I'd had back then, how those thoughts had evolved over the years. They asked if I would come and be their writer's assistant because they didn't think they'd have enough budget for one more staff writer, which I totally respected, but I didn't want to give up my health insurance. And I also was going out on other meetings, and so I didn't want to. If they had asked me a year ago if I'd wanted to be their writer's assistant, and a writer's assistant, just to for people that don't know in TV, is TV writing is a lot about talking. You're in a room with other writers talking all day about the characters and the stories and figuring out what the plot of the season is going to be in each episode. And the writer's assistant not only takes the notes, but also organizes that. And whenever anyone can't remember what they said 5 weeks ago, the writer's assistant has it in 2 seconds. They're truly superheroes. And if they had offered me that job, even a year or two prior, I would have taken it in a second. But because I had health insurance, I didn't want to give up that up. And I also, because I was going on more staffing meetings, I didn't want to not go on staffing meetings for 3 or 4 months because I felt like I was finally about to get the show. In that case, that no worked because a couple weeks later they did find the money and they asked if I wanted to come write on the show, and I said absolutely. You talked about this podcast being for people who are storytellers and writers and looking to build a life on that foundation and be professionals. I think sometimes on the outside looking in, and I'm happy to, any truths that are mine to tell and aren't, truths that I shouldn't be telling because because someone else wouldn't want me to be. I'm happy to tell that, shine a bright light on all the things you don't see when you look at someone's Wikipedia page or somebody's, interview with the Hollywood Reporter or whatever. I mean, the thing is, I could tell a version story where I basically told you, and then I went and Don Nicole, this meeting I'd been waiting for all my life. I'd always loved these people, got the job, blah, blah, blah. And that is the truth. But another piece of the truth is they at first offered me a support staff position, and there's absolutely a universe in which that would have made sense for me, but because of the timing and again the health insurance, I was like, I can't, not now, not, and it just worked out that they finally were able to figure out the money.
Because sometimes you have to stand your ground and like know your worth and, know kind of what you bring to the table.
You absolutely have to. I think it's our journey on this earth is both to like be kind to other people and also kind to ourselves. And you can only be kind to yourself if you're giving yourself what you deserve and if you're asking yourself. And also the thing is, whenever you say no to a job, there's always not only one person that desperately wants that job. There's 1,000 people that desperately want that job. So if it's not for you, you're leaving room for the right person who's going to cherish that job and really and need it in that moment to go ahead and step into the role.
Right. Yeah. I remember being in work talking with you guys there, and like it was a really great writer's room. Like it was my first writer's room that I had been in, and as an assistant and helping out, and just seeing the collaborative process that the people had at the table, and I really loved that.
Yeah, it couldn't have been a more positive experience in terms of Don and Nicole are such true blue writers and showrunners. They are kind and honest and respectful. They are excellent at their job, and they're also just excellent mentors. I usually call them this not on camera, but I call them my show moms. I hope they don't hate that.
I'm sure they will love it, yeah.
Don and Nicole are going to watch this episode. If they do, have a few things to say to me afterwards in an email, a sternly worded email. But I was so terrified. I was so scared. I would go home at night and I would just like fall asleep at 8 p.m. because the whole day I felt like I'd been running a marathon, like a mental marathon, just trying to place myself in everyone's brain, trying to figure out what Don and Nicole wanted, who they wanted me to be, trying to not just figure out everybody as brains, but also as relationships and just where my place was in this ecosystem. I think it felt like, I kind of felt like a polar bear dropped in a rainforest. I was just like, how does the jungle work? And it's, I think there is value in being support staff and getting to observe writers' rooms and kind of in a silent capacity, and that was just not my path and not my experience. So I pride myself in trying to be as quick a study as possible. A few things I did. One thing is I tried to look for where I could be of assistance and where I could be of use that maybe other people didn't have, like the bandwidth or the time. Don, of course, so busy running the show. Upper level people were very, very busy doing a lot of like heavy lifting with regards to story and writing. And also a lot of those people have had children and families and just like a lot of things juggle. I did not have a child. I did not have like a bunch outside of work. And so I was able to read my butt off. Just like I would, if an episode had a real life character, I'd find their biography or their memoir or letters that they had written, and I would just read and try to be of value in that way. And I would also just really I tried to use it as a masterclass. Those upper level writers were such excellent pitchers. They were but when I say pitch, what I mean is they were so good at expressing and communicating their ideas for a story or a moment. I would watch Don and Nicole in particular, not only how they would express their ideas, but how they would, when a pitch, an idea would really resonate with them. And I would start to, even though we had a writer's assistant that was not me, writing notes, I had a notebook and I would just write down the pitch verbatim. I'd go home at night, and this is so dorky, but I'd study the structure of, because I think I was like, wait, I've been alive a long time. I don't know how to effectively communicate ideas like these people do. So I just would like write down how it was, how the idea was spoken and communicated. Like it's almost like studying like screenplay structure, studying pitch structure. And I feel like I improved a lot, and also just like gained confidence and started going to bed at like 10 like a normal person. But like legit, I would fall asleep. I'd like fall asleep at my computer at like 7:30 at night because I was just trying so hard to be inside everyone's brains was so exhausting. So yeah, it was just like a positive, wild whirlwind, Yeah. Continue to be struck and grateful for how kind and supportive everyone was around me as mentors and colleagues.
Normally there's a writer's room. Everybody gets together, they pitch, they talk about their ideas, and we outline the structure of the show. Yeah. And then somewhere along the line, all the writers kind of write an episode. So what was it like? How was it like writing an episode for you?
I look back on it with a lot of pride. I'd written so many scripts, but I had never written a script trying to emulate someone else's voice. And I was doing my best to, and this is, I guess, the staff writer's job, right, is to emulate someone else's voice, but also to fill the script with the things that you feel like you bring to the table specifically. The reason that they hired you, they didn't hire you to
to be like a clone.
A parrot, a clone. They hire you to be almost like a choir member to be able to harmonize with them. And so I did my best. Every writer's room is different, but the way that room worked is you would take all the ideas for the episode and you would come in with a structure for it and you lay it on the board. And so I remember practicing that structure in front of a couple of friends the night before. Like I had them over at my apartment and I bought them like beer and pizza or whatever and did it for them. And I was so nervous doing it. I remember just being, again, I just remember like my hands shaking as I would like put these magnets up on the board. These like, we had these like whiteboard magnets essentially were made out of whiteboard so you could write on them, these tiles, I guess. When Donna and Nicole, and this is, by the way, this is a showrunner's prerogative, the writers take their best shot at writing the episodes, but then the showrunner takes it over and runs it through their typewriter, which means they will rewrite the things that don't feel quite right to them. And I remember when I saw the various scenes, first of all, was really excited and grateful when certain scenes weren't rewritten, but felt like such like deep shame at anything that was rewritten. I was like, why wasn't I better at getting inside Dawn and Nicole's head? Why didn't I know? And now being a showrunner, I'm like, oh, you dummy. Like they were just so grateful they didn't have to like rewrite every single word of your script. Like some scenes worked for them and like that, but all I could see, again, because I was so neurotic at the time, I felt like I had failed them. I'm like, oh my God, they had to rewrite like those 5 scenes. And now I'm like, 5 scenes is nothing. It's nothing.
Well,
so
it does hurt because there's that moment where it's like you feel like you're inadequate or maybe you failed or
right.
And I think all writers have that issue. You know, we all go through that. Yeah,
for sure. And I think because I've had this experience now, I think some writers, when you rewrite them, like are angry, like they do not take it kindly. And I've had some conversations where I've gotten a talking to, and I'm like, I'm your boss. I'm just joking. It's always, first of all, I think it's a beautiful thing when there can be enough transparency with a superior and a colleague that you can have that honest conversation where there is pushback. I've been met from time to time with maybe some frustration or anger or resentment. I think I actually wasn't feeling those things at all, and to my best memory what I was feeling was just this like feeling of having let Dawn and Nicole down, which now I'm sure they would like laugh. They'd be like, Kit, we didn't have to rewrite literally every single word of your script. And you were one of the lowest level writers. Like, yeah, fine, everything's fine. Shh, don't worry about it. I have less neuroses in my elder years, but in my youth I had more.
But that's the thing with youth. I mean, you grow, you learn. The idea is not to stay there. The idea is to keep moving forward and to keep growing. And you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
You got to start somewhere.
Because now that I do the same job as them, I look back and I'm continually wowed by their grace, their compassion, their easy, fearless leadership. Like they're great. They're great at their jobs. They're great bosses. We're both lucky we got to work with them.
Absolutely, 100% agree. So after Z, what was the next path for you?
So that pilot I had written that Dawn and Nicole responded to and hired me off of was called Widow at the time, and we sold that pilot to Showtime. Elizabeth Olsen was attached to star, and it's always weird because she goes by Lizzie in real life, so it's always very strange for me to use her stage name, but also no one knows who I'm talking about when I say Lizzie. But Elizabeth, quote unquote, Lizzie Olsen, in her contract they put like a real finite window on Showtime. They said you've got a clock. You can't take 3-5 years to decide if you're going to make this or not. So they had like 6 months by the time everything was signed. I mean, I had a great time developing the show with them. And developing means they read the pilot and they gave me feedback and I rewrote it, more feedback. Sometimes if you will just sell, it's called a pitch, you'll just sell the idea to the network and then you'll write an outline and then you'll write a script and they're giving you notes all along the way. But in this case, the scripts were already written, so they were giving me notes on the rewrite. So ultimately, because Lizzie was attached and had a big Avengers schedule, we couldn't take forever with them. So they ultimately decided they couldn't move as quickly as we need them to and gave it back to us. And we were able to take it back. There were a couple of places that had wanted it before that wanted it again. Facebook had just opened its doors and was going to be making original content. Spoiler, they didn't make content for very long. It was all like 3 years, I think. But there was a moment where they wanted to be a Netflix and Amazon and Apple. A couple other places were saying they would buy the pilot and develop it, and maybe even do like a mini room, which is like, hey, we'll pay for you guys to get some writers to write a couple episodes, write a couple outlines, talk about what the season would be. And Facebook said, we will give you $30 million to make a season of television. And so it kind of felt like a no-brainer. They said, we'll make 10 episodes. With $30 million, $3 million an episode, we will make a season of television. And that was, I was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens to Facebook. We'll see if it, ends up being an Amazon or Netflix. Spoiler, it didn't end up being that. But the fact was we were going to get to make a season of television.
That's huge.
It was always meaningful. Yeah, it's so hard to do. So so we did it. We that was, I guess we must have gotten the green light from them in like spring, summer of 2017. I think it took until maybe October, November to get deals redone. We hired writers and we started a room in January of 2018, and we were shooting the pilot in March of 2018. And by June of 2018, we had finished the season. And then I think we dropped the season on Facebook in September, October 2018. We did a second season in 2019. So we made 20 episodes, and it was one of the most extraordinary things that's ever happened to me. It was a crucible experience. It's interesting because talking about Avengers, fellow Avenger, Robert Downey Jr. talk about the experience of being a Marvel superhero as this crucible experience. Like you come out steel or you come out dust is his direct quote. And that's how I felt creating a show and making a show. And I think I'm not going to say I think I did come out steel by the end, but I felt like I was going to be dust a lot in between. And it really, I do think this job brings out the best and the worst in people. And I think it asks you to examine your real weaknesses and recognize them for what they are and figure out, well, can you fix them? Can you muscle up on those weaknesses? Or maybe that muscling up is going to take a long time. Can you hire people that can support you and have strengths that balance out your weaknesses? There's a lot of ways of figuring it out, but it's really the experience for me. It felt like just turning the biggest magnifying glass on myself, and there were things I think that both telling this very personal story over the course of 2 seasons, in which none of it was strictly autobiographical. I wasn't Olsen's character. Her family wasn't my family. The world wasn't my world, but it was kind of a funhouse mirror version of my life and my relationships. And it really, sometimes people would say things in the writer's room about this character or her marriage or her family. And I was like, you know what? That is also true about me and my marriage and my family. It's all coming out here. So it was kind of therapy in 3D in a very odd way. And I also had to learn to be a boss, a leader, a showrunner. And I didn't get to learn it in school or quietly observing someone. I kind of had to learn out in the open. And I'm not embarrassed. I've heard first-time showrunners, they lose control or are unkind or even cruel, and I don't think I was any of those things. But I definitely, there are things I handled clumsily that now I wouldn't, or things that I would obsess about that now just wouldn't even be a thing. But to your earlier point, that's just experience. My son learned to, I guess he was a bit of a late walker, so he's almost 2, but he learned to walk I guess 15 months. But I wasn't watching him hold on to the coffee table and learn to walk and being like, come on, why aren't you running a marathon? That's crazy. When you're new to something, when you're a baby learning to walk, you don't run a marathon the next day. But although babies do learn to walk once they get the hang of it, they really are, it's kind of amazing watching that. But I do think the metaphor applies to learning how to do a job like showrunning as well, where it was, I did feel so clumsy and so scared at times. And now there are new things. You level up and there are new things I feel clumsy at or feel scared about, but not things I used to feel clumsy at or scared about, which I guess that's progress. It's just always finding new things to feel like you're bad at. I don't know.
It's growing. It's a growing thing. Your show. So this was your show that you put together. You were the showrunner. What was?
So I had co-showrunners both seasons. Okay. Now I am the sole showrunner on the projects I'm working on. But at that time I had partners and really mentors. I wasn't alone. I had people that trenches with me, multiple trenches. There were so many trenches.
It's the moment you get out of one, you get back in another.
Both seasons I had a partner really helping me, and I'm super grateful to those people.
What was the writing process like for that?
I came into both seasons with ideas I was really excited about. And it was interesting because some of those ideas, each season there were ideas I had coming in that really made it to screen exactly how I envisioned it in my head. Really, like, pretty much there was a direct line from the original intent to what happened on screen. And also both seasons there was real alchemy in the writer's room, and things that I never would have been able to dream up by myself came up through other individuals brought ideas to the table, or it was a synergy and the alchemy of a bunch of brains working together. And of course, also the actors brought so much. Lizzie brought so much to that role. Jovan, Mamadou, Kelly, and Janet, who are our series regulars, all brought so much. The directors would bring so much. The list goes on because they talk about television and film being a collaborative medium. That's, I think, at its best, it is. We have a script and we bring in the actor. Just a monologue feels weird in their mouth. They just don't quite believe it. Lizzie would say to me, like, I can do this in a look. Like, this is 4 lines, but, like, just let me. I mean, I don't know if she actually said that, but I think she did say that, actually, or something like that. And she'd be right. Or I remember in the second season, there was a director who, this is small but important, we'd written an episode to be very interior because we had a bunch of our main sets on a soundstage, and we owned the soundstage. I mean, we'd have to go out, we'd have to, like, make the entire crew drive somewhere and rent a house for, like, a crazy amount of money because filming in LA is crazy expensive. So it's always, our main sets were her apartment in the past, the house that she lived in with her mom and her sister in the present, this dance studio, this exercise studio they all worked at. And if we could shoot interiors there, those were less expensive episodes. Anyway, I remember a director, we had an episode that was very interior, very much on those stages, and a director really pushing for that last scene to be outside, which would mean we'd have to go drive to the house that we were faking as the exterior of their house in Altadena, and it would be more expensive and a little bit of a hassle. But that director was right. It was better. It was way, way, way better to that last scene, which was so important to that episode. We were saying goodbye to a major character for several episodes. It was so much better to say goodbye to them and to watch them actually leave the house and to watch the remaining family members on that porch than it would have been to play it in the hallway on the soundstage. Anyway, I think there's just 1,000 examples of, you know, you have be it a pitch for an episode or the script, or and the people whose job it is to bring it to life come in and have ideas. And by the way, sometimes someone will have an idea and I'll say, that's super cool. Let me tell you what happens in a couple episodes. And I worry that if this thing that we're talking about, if your pitch happens here, I worry that we're not properly setting up. Like, so what I'm trying to get at is, like, if there is a good narrative reason why someone's idea is maybe not possible, or it's wonderful, but we know that Facebook wants this episode to be 30 minutes and that idea is going to add 5 minutes onto the runtime or $100,000 into the budget. Like, if there's a good concrete reason why I need to gently but firmly tell somebody that we have to move on from an idea, I will. But a lot of times the idea is just like I'll take it, I'll metabolize it, maybe I'll even, like, sit with it overnight, but it ends up being just as good as what I thought, often better. Mm-hmm. And I think there's really something to be said for when ideas are lateral moves or steps forward, to have everybody that gets an idea not only considered but absorbed into the episode feels that authorship along with whoever wrote it or is showrunning it or is directing it or starring in it. And it feels, I think it's a really, not only do I think it elevates the art, I think it's a really healthy thing for a set to be filled with people who feel a real ownership of the show and a real pride in the show and an authorship even in appropriate ways. And it's always my goal is for people to feel real authorship in their roles.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I do my best. It's all you can do on this earth is your best.
Well, that's great, because I feel like that also encourages people to work harder than they would if they didn't feel the ownership.
Yeah.
You know, if they didn't feel that collaborative process. Like, for me, like, Lord of the Rings is one of my all-time favorite films. And I always watch the behind the scenes, and you kind of see the way the set operated and the way that people, like, poured their hearts out for the show. and the movie because they felt so connected and they were so invested in it.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you can get those people around you and you can create that environment where they can become as invested in the show as you are, as the leader.
Yeah.
That's when you can make magic happen.
Yeah. I think about it a lot. I think about not only process a lot, but how to make the process as positive as possible for everybody. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of ways to run a writer's room in a way that leaves people feeling quite demoralized. I think if you keep people for too many hours, especially these days, a lot of writers' rooms, not all, but a lot of them are on Zoom, and Zoom can be particularly draining. But if you keep people all day and all night, I don't think the work is that good after a certain hour of the day. I don't think like ideas are, I don't think brains are at their sharpest. I don't think people are at their most inspired. There's diminishing returns where people start to feel like you're taking them away from their family, their friends, their puppies, and there's like a growing resentment of this thing. And I have a lot of friends that are writers that talk about rooms where their time and their humanity feels not respected in ways big and small. So I'm always doing my very, very best, and again, a work in progress like we all are, but I'm always doing my best to make sure that I'm coming into the day with a real game plan, that I'm really hearing people out and understanding a pitch to the best of my ability. I tried a lot more. I think I used to, when I'd hear an idea and I had a knee-jerk, like, no, I don't like it, I would just say, like, I don't think so, or I'm not sure. Like, even if I don't understand an idea immediately or don't like an idea immediately, I always try to ask questions and get my head fully around why this person is excited about it, or vice versa. I'll be very excited about something and I can tell someone has a bump and just isn't feeling it, and rather than just steamroll and be like, it's my show, we're doing the thing that I'm excited about, I really try to ask the questions. Like, it's clear that it's clear that you're not seeing what I'm seeing. Can you speak to why you're feeling resistant or hesitant or concerned? And I think those questions always lead somewhere good. I'm a little, I mean, again, I wish I was like, I came out of the womb perfect. I'm a little embarrassed. I'm like, I wish I'd always like been more Socratic in my show running. I wish I'd always like asked a bunch of questions and been a better listener and like taken the time to metabolize an idea rather than like immediately shutting it down before I fully understood it. But like, I didn't know, and I do now. And I'm continuing to figure out how to actively listen and how to actively absorb, because I do think not only does it lead to the best scripts, but it leads to a room of people who feel completely as seen and as heard as you can feel. If the hours are reasonable, if everybody's coming in, if you set expectations accordingly, if you say this week is going to be a tough week, I try to set a schedule where everyone knows the hours could be as long as, let's say, 9 to 3 or 9 to 4. My goal is to let you out at 2 o'clock. If we're having a really tough day, it might go till 4. So they blocked out that time, but I try to let people go. And imagine if your teacher like let you go 2 hours from school, and like you had two extra hours to like do your homework. If like you didn't have homework per se, like you didn't have to like write an essay, you just like think. Come back tomorrow with an idea. I think people are incentivized that afternoon and evening to like, yeah, go get a massage, go play with their toddler in the park, dinner with their husband, like whatever. But there's that time to think and dream. And I do think the ideas that come back the next day are better than they would have been if I had just kept them through dinner. Or I mean, people stay. There are people who bring sleeping bags to their jobs. There are people to this job to show. Yeah. Like there are showrunners who are famous for having their writers bring sleeping bags to work, and I don't understand it. But as my dad says, it takes all kinds. It takes all kinds. But that's sleeping bag writers' rooms are not my kind.
How do you deal with like rejection? So that's something a lot of writers, especially writers that are kind of starting out, and they're still trying to find their place, and they have to deal with that rejection. So how do you deal with it without it, hurting your self-esteem and your soul and spirit?
Yeah. It used to just flatten me when someone didn't like the thing. It would just kill me because it felt so personal. It felt like, oh, they don't like this script. That means I am a failure. I will never be worthy. I should crawl into a hole and never come out. And I don't feel that way anymore because it's not sustainable. First of all, no matter how big or small it is, it doesn't hurt the way it used to. It feels like a slap in the face, not like a hammer to the skull. You know what I mean? Like it's like
you can survive, you can get through it. Yeah.
It doesn't not sting. It stings. Mm-hmm. I got kind of one earlier this week, and it was like the afternoon was fine. I was functional, but like I definitely felt it. It was a bummer. I try to be Socratic with myself as well. I try to ask myself questions about the feeling. Why does it hurt? What does this rejection mean? What am I afraid will happen as a result of this rejection? Or flipping it, what was I hoping would happen if there was acceptance on the other end of that phone call or that email or whatever? And I think those questions lead me to really interesting places, and it kind of feels like cartoons where like a little kid's in bed and there's like a really creepy shadow on the wall. It looks like a monster, and they turn the light and it's actually like a coat rack, and like that kind of is what it feels like to ask myself questions about anything. The feeling of being rejected, like any negative feeling you can feel attached to making art. Yeah, I just kind of keep asking myself this like line of questions, and it usually ends up leading somewhere interesting and shining light on something, and it usually ends up making the rejection not feel as global or as crushing as it could have felt. Outside these monasteries, these Buddhist monks will make these sand paintings on the plazas outside these monasteries. Have you seen these at all?
I don't think so.
But they're beautiful. They're like these mandalas. They're like so these intricate patterns, and they just like spread out and out and out. These glorious pieces of art. Well, it's made of sand and it's outside. So guess what happens? The wind blows it away. And that's the whole point of these sand paintings, is they're supposed to be impermanent. It's not supposed to be about building anything that will last. It's supposed to be about just being so present and in the moment, and just like the act of creation and the act of making is enough, or at least that's my interpretation of it. That's what I think about every time I'm in any phase of the art, be it am I writing a script, am I making a season of television, am I just having an idea, am I making this pilot for FX coming up, and it's when you make a pilot you have no idea if they're going to order it to series, and a part of me, I mean, it'll be brutal if that happens. I love this thing, but at the same time, I'm like, I get to make 45, 50 minutes of this thing I love. We get to cast it with actors I think are extraordinary. We were hiring HODs that blow my mind. My director, in addition to being such a valued colleague, has become such a dear friend. All that stuff is so meaningful, and it's about the moment. Like, we're just making the most beautiful thing we can in the moment. And whatever happens, it will be very, very sad. Nathan, it will be so sad. It's not about what happens next. It's about in this moment. None of us are owed or guaranteed anything. And I think that that is a terrifying thought, but it's also an incredibly freeing thought, because then it just becomes about what you're doing today as an artist, and tomorrow can take care of itself, you know?
Yeah.
Well, Zen wisdom for your Sunday afternoon.
We all need that. And we all need to kind of live in the moment and know that we're finite, you know. Yeah. You want to enjoy the moment, make the most of it, and be yourself.
Yeah, it's very hard to do that though. Like, I don't want to be like, oh yeah, just like do sand paintings, like it's easy, no big deal, don't worry about it. Live for the moment. Like, it's very challenging, but I think it is something really valuable to aspire to, and just like surrendering to the universe. And I actually, not to be too like LA hippie woo-woo, but I do think when you come at art and collaboration with that mentality, with like a mentality of like both generosity and surrender, I think you both attract collaborators that are worthy of that process. I think you are like, it's like flowers and bees, right? Like, you really are attracting like pollinators. I just think it's just better all around. I think anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Where do you get your inspiration from for your stories?
In any given moment. I mean, I said I've got a toddler now, so I think motherhood is something that really takes up a lot of my space, mental space, and I think a lot about what the most powerful and necessary version of that story would be. I'm definitely thinking about that. So I think whatever's taking up my mental space, whatever I'm wrestling with. It's interesting with television specifically. They say that film is about questions that can be answered in 90 minutes or 2.5 hours, and television is a question that can never be answered. It's an impossible question, and that question that can't be answered is the thing that keeps the engine of the series running. And so I think the impossible questions of my life particularly help with television. If it's something I haven't been able to solve in my like 3+ decades. I'm like, yeah, that's probably enough time for like 4 or 5 seasons of wrestling. or enough ramp for 4 or 5 seasons of wrestling, enough track for characters to really dig in. And also it's, I'm playing to the top of my intelligence. If I can't figure out this thing, it must be complex enough for other characters playing to the top of their intelligence to stump really smart people. And that's what I want to see on television. I don't want to see just tell me you love them. It's not that big a deal. Like, I want to see characters wrestling with things and feel so anchored in them that I don't know how to solve their problems either. I think for me that's the most effective way to engage with characters is just to not be able to get above them, to just so be rooted in them and so get why their problems are nearly insurmountable.
What are some of the process? So we talked about kind of broadly about writing. Can you talk maybe a little specifics about like what your day-to-day looks like when you're writing?
With showrunning, I think people think you create a television show and you get to write all the time, and you actually create a television show and you get to write very little. You have to like steal the time to write. It just depends on what part of the process we're at, because if it's a writer's room per se, and we're doing the room, but I'm also like we're figuring out episodes, but I'm also writing an episode. We'll probably have that room from, I don't know, 9 to 1, 9 to 2, and then I'll write like 2 to 6. Maybe I will have gotten up like an hour before my son gets up and I'll write for an hour. I'll probably write on the weekends. I'll probably like carve out 3 or 4 hours, and my husband and son will go do something fun, and I'll miss them a lot while I am like stuck at home writing. It's very rare these days that I just have like a pure writing day. It's all kinds of meetings with actors, meetings with heads of departments, meetings with our producers, our weekly meetings with our network. I'm watching tons of auditions. Like, it's just there's a few things. By the way, I still do need to do this an additional pass. I'll do several passes on this pilot before it's shot. But there's outstanding things I do need to change in the pilot, and I just haven't had the chance because I've been so busy. I'll have to carve out that time. Actors will tape their auditions, and then there's a couple of key relationships in the show that we'll do chemistry reads for. We'll bring in a couple pairs of actors and have them read and see what their chemistry is. There are sides we've used for these actors to do their self-tapes or individual auditions, and I've realized, there are things that need to change in those sides. I think that it'll be a more effective scene for the chemistry read if I cut this, add this, restore this thing that I had deleted 3 drafts ago. And again, that will all just have to get fit in. So that was really not an answer to your question. What a writing day is like it's not. I'm doing a lot of not writing, and then the writing has to be like early mornings, like after the kid goes to bed, like is usually when I carve it out. It's possible if there's like a weird free day, because every once in a while these days there's like a weird free day, then I will go all in and like put it all in there. But it really is, I used to joke when people ask me what my writing process is, I'd say, when's it due? When's the deadline? But it's kind of true. My process is, okay, they need it on Friday, so I will write it by Thursday night at the latest. They say this for a lot of professions. Journalists become editors, and teachers become principals, and TV writers become showrunners, and you essentially you're promoted out of the thing you were hired to do. So when you're a TV writer, you're hired to write, but you're
also managing.
You're promoted to being a CEO of a small company. Right. The only way you get to write is by also being a CEO. I think there are some people who they call it like a non-writing producer. Like they really like those people tend to really like the writer's room and post, which is like the editing bay, and they really hire people to like be their set person or be their person that really runs interference with the studio and the network and all the people that there are to run interference with. But I like the CEO stuff. I like the showrunner stuff. I like the problem solving in real time. I also feel like it's all a part of the storytelling. You
want to give that up.
Yeah, there's so many things I have to delegate in this job no matter what, but I really always want to have like an eye on each wheel of the machine. I don't want to have no idea what's going on with a huge part of the machine. And again, some people can, or they have like a partner that likes doing that stuff and they focus on the creative and it works. It works. Right. But I think for me, in order to really have a full sense of the creative, I need to know what's happening with every part of the machine, because also there's money at play. Like there's a finite budget, there's a budget cap. And so if I have no idea that we've spent too much money on our cast, now don't really have the money to execute the VFX of the show or the design of the show, like that's a real problem. Like in order to really creatively execute the show, I need to know about all the mundane day-to-day, like dollars and cents,
right.
Bureaucracy. I don't, again, some people can do the job without knowing all that stuff. I don't know how to. Or effectively. I don't know how to effectively do the job without knowing that stuff.
Right. That's good. And it also gives you like a bird's eye view of like everything that's going on, so you can understand.
It's also fun. It's like being an undergrad again. You get to take a bunch of classes and things that you're kind of, I'm never going to be a costume designer. I'm never going to be a line producer. I'm never going to be an actor, by the way. But it's really fun to kind of almost like a student, like sit at their feet, like they're the masters, and I'm learning just enough to be able to communicate and support them. But it's like, it's fun to learn about camera lenses. It's fun. It's always a joy when you get to work a job that teaches you so much continually. But there's a lot of me like smiling and nodding when a cinematographer is talking about like lenses. I'm like, I know the difference between a long lens and a wide lens. And as of this moment, that is where I stop. That's where I get off. I don't know how to paint with light. I don't know how to frame like an artist. I love DPs, but it's just not my terrain.
No. If you were talking to your younger self, like what's some of the advice that you would give?
There's a podcast that people who are curious about working in television, I think might really like a lot. It's called Happier in Hollywood. I'll take a little tangent. I'll recommend a couple of podcasts that I like definitely. A lot. It's Liz Craft and Sarah Fain. They're a writing team, and they're generous and lovely, and they talk about, much like this show, they talk about making television, but really they try to expand it so it feels like it's not inside baseball. It's like for everybody. But they have a saying that I love, which is, we want volunteers, not recruits, which means we want people to volunteer for this job. Whatever job we're hiring, we want people to really, really want it. We don't want to be running after somebody, begging, pleading, manipulating, wheedling them into taking the job. And I have found that is so true. If I feel like there is some hesitation on someone's end when I'm interviewing them, or when I'm interviewing them for a job, they almost always turn it down, and I never push it, because in the past I've tried to push it with a couple of people, and in a couple of cases they did come on board and it was a mistake. They knew they didn't want the job. They knew it wasn't the right fit, like somewhere down deep they knew, and they still came aboard and it wasn't the right fit. And then kind of conversely, I think sometimes you meet someone on a project and it is exactly the right thing for both of you. I think that's certainly the case. It's been the case with, I think, certainly for Lizzie Olsen to star in Sorry for Your Loss. It was exactly the role she needed and that she'd been waiting for. And that was an extraordinary thing. But I think that was the case for several of the actors and writers on the show and department heads. And that's something I look for when I'm casting this new thing and hiring this new thing. Our director, this pilot was exactly what she had been looking for. And so not only were we a fit as a partnership, and we are a fit as a partnership, but it's kind of an amazing thing when the project is exactly right for somebody. There's another expression I like, which is like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Maybe you've heard that. I think on a personal level, whenever I'm looking for a project, I'm like, is this exactly what I need? Is this exactly what my life has been building to? And if it's not, I just gracefully step aside and leave it for the person whose life has been building to that. I vet people like crazy now. I didn't used to. I make sure to call a couple people that have worked with that person and ask what it was like to work with that person. Would you work with them again? If you were going to work with them again, would you have any constructive feedback for them this go around about what would make the process better for both of you? I didn't do that before. I just kind of, I was like, oh,
you look good on paper.
Yeah, this is your resume. We met. Cool. Sometimes it worked out and sometimes it didn't. But I've never had a situation where I properly vetted somebody and then they completely turn out to be a different person. It's like if you talk to a couple of people and ask the right questions, I've been properly set in terms of expectations of what I'm getting into. So I think that's kind of it's important to be decisive in this job, but like I think it's also important to really let someone speak and really understand what someone's trying to say. People at their best as showrunners, I think, are people who are exceptional listeners. I want to come with like one last great thing to like leave you with.
One last little nugget. ...
ellipses. I was going to say one thing about making art. It's that every time I have felt like I was creating art from a place of safety and security. Like, this will work. The people will want this. The marketplace will want this. My bosses will want this. I feel like I've always failed. I feel like if I'm really trying to kind of please like an imaginary external world with my art, it's never good enough. Whenever I write from a place where I really feel like I'm on the knife's edge, when I really feel like it's a big swing. Like, I could really miss. That's the stuff that always gets like the real response. And when I feel particularly naked in my writing and naked in my art, I feel like that's when I've gotten the most personal responses, and people have connected in the most personal way. It's hard enough to do once or a dozen times to like do that for the rest of your life, to make art that freaks you out and totally be vulnerable and totally surrender and expose yourself and be pretty sure that the thing you're making is too risky and crazy to work. That's like a really wild way to live a life. But I also don't know how to make good art any other way. It's the only way I know how to make good art. And it truly is only when I'm like, this is so weird and people are gonna think I'm bad at writing, or people are gonna think I'm insane. That's the stuff that has really resonated. I think maybe I am still scrappy and stupid. Like, I think I didn't change. I think I was scrappy and stupid in college. I think I'm scrappy and stupid now. We didn't get into astrology, but I am an Aries rising, and so it does track. I think as Aries rising tend to be scrappy and stupid in equal measures.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Kit. This has been such a pleasure talking to you.
I got to talk about art with an old friend for an hour.
It's amazing.
Who could ask for anything more?
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Well, thank you guys for listening and watching, and make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys next time.